Hi everybody, welcome to Imirt Inspire. I'm Colin Larkin and I'm really pleased to welcome our guest, Tanya X Short.
Hello,
Welcome.
everybody.
So as usual, if you can just give me a shout in the channel if there's an issue, if you can hear us. So if sound levels are okay, we'll keep going. Now my internet is being a little skippy this morning, so the stream may skip occasionally. We'll try and work around it. So thanks for joining me. As usual, if you have any questions, just pile them into the Twitch chat and I'll work them in here. So welcome, Tanya. You are based in Montreal.
Yep, that's true. And we just had a whole blizzard yesterday, so it's feeling extra Montreal right now.
Are you under deep snow?
Yeah, there's like a foot out there. It's crazy.
That's good. we
Yeah.
almost never get snow here. So snow is an amazing thing when we see it.
Well, I love snow, but it is March 15th at this point. So, I was kind of ready for spring, but here we are.
It's true. And well, yeah, we're deep into spring here. We've got a sunny day today. So thanks for joining me. I want to ask you about game development, but before we get stuck into that, how did you find yourself making games?
Well, actually, it came out of complete obsession with it. So I don't know if you ever played them, but text-based and MMOs, MUDs,
I sure
were really important to me in high school. And I actually started getting so involved with them that I was a volunteer making, rooms and monsters and helping run community events and things like that. It was basically my whole life. Did you ever play MUDs?
I did. I got really hooked on one particular MUD. It was called the Final Challenge.
Oh, interesting.
Which one were you playing in? This would have been probably around a similar time.
I was playing this commercial set called the Iron Realms MUDs, which are still going actually. They had one or two paid employees per MUD, but my main one was Ayatollah, which was like the vampire one.
That's cool. So if you're not aware, viewers, a MUD was a text-only MMO. So imagine if you took an old text adventure game, go north, kill goblin with sword, and made it massively multiplayer.
Yeah.
And
it was pretty
intense. They're really interesting.
Especially, I was in high school and I played a few of the PvP ones, so I became a very good typist.
Yes, yeah. Good typing skills, logic, scripting, all of these things are like useful skills for mudding.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, I got involved with that. I realized I really loved it. I loved like designing little levels and stories in the games. And so after I was an English literature major in college, and then I went to go teach English in Japan. But while I was there, I kind of got even more into being a MUD volunteer. So at this point, I had been doing MUDs for like 10 years or something. And I decided it made sense to really try to make a go at a career. So I went into grad school. And I guess I'll keep going. I don't know if your internet is skipping.
You got into grad school, was it?
Yeah, so I went to grad school at the Guildhall at SMU in Texas, and then my first job in the industry full-time was working as an AI designer on Age of Conan for Funcom in Norway.
And was that after it had launched? That's a big MMO, right?
Yeah, I joined right after launch. And that was 2008 was when I joined, and that was kind of a banner year for every company making MMOs. So it was easy for me to find somewhere that I could, be sufficiently passionate, I guess.
And how long did you end up working there?
I worked in Norway for 2 years, and then they moved everybody to Montreal. And then I worked in Montreal for another 3 years. For 1 year on this kind of miserable Facebook project where I was lead designer. And then I was very, very happy when a year later they moved me to the secret world which was their next big project, and I worked on that for another couple of years. And then I started KidFox, and 4 years later, here we are.
And KidFox is your own company.
Yes,
Cool.
I am the captain. I do have two co-founders. We all share equally, an artist and lead programmer. We released Shattered Planet and then Moon Hunters last year, and we're doing lots of secrets right now.
Cool. So I'm going to drag you back in time because I want to talk a little bit more about MUDs. Then I want to talk
Absolutely.
about MMOs. Then I want to talk about all KidFox stuff. So MUDs are super interesting to me because they're kind of a precursor to MMOs, and they had to solve a lot of problems MMOs obviously have before they became super popular. So they were very small in the terms of gaming audiences we see today. You could have a really, I'm guessing those ones you were into that had like paid staff, they probably still only had a few hundred active players.
Yeah, I think at any one time they'd only have like 100 people online at a given time, but they probably had a few thousand monthly.
Yeah. So I mean, if you think about an MMO these days, they'd shut it down if there was only a couple thousand, the really big ones.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that this kind of huge kind of like, and there were loads of them. There were lots and lots of thousands of MUDs were running, and a lot of them were volunteer run and were free. So it's really interesting. They were doing stuff like permanent player death, some of them, but certainly a lot of player on player murder and interaction and role playing and needing community and moderation and all kinds of interesting stuff that was kind of happening since I think they started in the 70s.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel like a lot of the lessons from some of those MUDs still haven't been revisited. Like the one I was really obsessed with, the Iron Realm series at least had pretty intensive like political structures that outside of EVE Online, like I know that there have been a few MUDs that have them, but they haven't quite captured the same level of electing another player to be, president of the world kind of thing.
That's super cool. And
Yeah.
did it work? Did people?
Yeah. It was really
have
interesting.
To obey the like systems?
Well, so they would get some special powers to define like the rules of the classes, and they would get to actually talk with the employees of the MUD and whatever. But I mean, a lot of it was almost like manufacturing celebrity in a way, which was been really interested in social mechanics and like cooperative mechanics, and politics is kind of the ultimate version of that, right?
Yeah. And so in one I played, I mean, they had player run gods who were kind of like, they kind of ran their own special clans, but they didn't really, and they had some special powers, but they didn't have an effect on people outside of their little clan essentially. So referencing EVE is an interesting one there, where you're saying there were player run things that had far reaching consequences.
Yeah, I mean, so each class basically had their kind of leader, and you could get kind of exiled from your class organization if you pissed off the leadership, and that meant that the only way you could skill up, like increase your skills, would be to sneak into the guild hall, which usually had very elaborate security measures. And so it just, I don't know, it created this kind of interesting identity, but also like regional factionalism that was really strong. And I haven't seen it really revisited. EVE is the closest, but it's still not quite what I experienced there, which is very far from what KidFox is doing right now as well. But maybe I'll get back to that someday.
There's definitely a space there for making games that, it's weird. It's kind of weird that EVE are the only people who are making a game where they kind of let you do anything you're allowed to do. You can use out of game, espionage and diplomacy and stuff like that to have real effects in the game and in the game economy.
Yeah, I mean, I think even CCP knows that they're sitting on something they're not really sure how to replicate, because that kind of system does easily fall apart if you don't have an active enough player base. It's very hard to scale both up and down.
And you kind of have to believe in it.
CCP hasn't made another EVE.
Yes.
Sorry?
Sorry, and you kind of the player base has to kind of believe in it. You know,
Yeah.
um, you know, if people just exploited it or found some way to break it, or you know, CCP themselves weren't, you know, were restricting things in some way that the player base didn't believe in, the whole thing would fall down, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe it's a miracle it survived this far. I don't know.
Yeah. Um, I certainly wouldn't want to try and do it. um, and so when you were, did did you find muds and like working on muds like was a good introduction to making games like from scratch?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I don't know about it teaching me from scratch. I kind of learned doing that as a hobbyist on the side because, you know, in 2008, 2009, it was kind of a good time to be in the yo-yo games community and making little games for game jams and stuff. But it did teach me a lot about best practices and how to take player feedback because, you know, I worked on basically live MUDs for 3 years, or sorry, live MMOs. And the Age of Conan player base wasn't all roses and rainbows. But they let me as a designer go on the forums and talk to the players and get feedback. And I guess I learned a little bit about how to read the crowd, I guess, which was valuable later.
Is there a secret there? Because I find that very difficult.
The secret there is to know that even if they're really upset, it means that they really love the game. Somebody who's absolutely trashing and hating on your game wants their mind changed. They want to love the game, and that's why they're so upset. And it's possible you can't flip them, but they're actually easier game and then walk away without saying anything. They just silently quit.
Yeah.
And I guess it's really hard to keep in mind when they're calling you names and they're calling your game names and they're accusing you of things. But really, it's all coming from this place of where they feel betrayed because they wanted to love the game.
Yeah, it's true. It's very hard though. A lot of people use you know a particularly skilled community manager to be the person managing that process. Do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's even though I can do it, I'm probably going to try and step away from it because no matter what I do, it's always going to be a distraction as a game designer to be focusing constantly on what people are saying. So we did actually recently hire a community manager. She's starting on Thursday. Victoria is going to be awesome. And so it's totally a valid strategy. It's just for us, we couldn't really afford that. And I was good enough at it that it was okay for us, but that's unusual.
So when you're starting out, you had a team of 3 or 4 people. That side of things, let's say when your first game launched, it's a big time commitment.
Yes.
To manage your community, talk to them, deal with them, distill what they want, help them with their problems. Did you find that was like your full-time job or more than one person out of that 4?
Well, I mean, around launch, I would say close. I would say 80% of my job. The other 20% was firefighting of prioritizing which bugs were important and which crash reports to address first and that kind of thing. But the rest of the time, it's a little community management is an infinite hour task, which means if you're not careful, it can become a full-time job no matter how many people are doing more you could be doing on Twitter or Facebook or a blog or Twitch or whatever. So you kind of have to use self-discipline to say, these are the things I want to get done. This is the minimum amount of time I can get it done. And then just limit yourself to that and see if that's enough. But I think part of the issue is that your first game, at least our first game, I mean, it's never quite as popular as you maybe hope it will be.
That's Shattered Planet, at least, right?
Yeah, in general, I would say people's first games tend to not be world-changing. But yeah, Shattered Planet, it did fine. It was good. We still had a lot of work to do around launch, and it was still an infinite amount of energy we could pour into community management. But
when did that come out?
2014.
Okay.
July 2014, it came on Steam. And, it sold
How long had
okay.
you been working on it?
We had been working on it for a year
Okay, cool.
at that point.
And before that, you'd come out of a Canadian incubator, right? Games
Well,
incubator?
the incubator was specifically to make Shattered Planet. Like, they gave
Okay.
us minimum wage for 6 months.
Yeah.
And then we managed to extend it for 3 more months, and then we worked for 3 months without any pay, and then we released on Steam. At the end of the incubator, technically, we had released soft and a free-to-play version on mobile, which actually hurt us on Steam later. But
How come?
well, because Steam players, they're very convinced that any game that was on mobile at all, it cannot possibly be qualified to be a Steam game, or at least this is what they felt in 2014. I don't know if people's minds have changed since
I'd
then.
say they feel that maybe even stronger now.
Yeah. And then, oh my God, if you made a free-to-play version, oh, God help you. So that was pretty intense, but it still sold fine. Like, it was still good for a company. But then Moonhunters was a bigger launch, and then I'm sure our next game will be a bigger launch again. So it's good that we try scaling up our community management labor.
So, Shattered Planet, the style of game it is, I haven't played it. I've looked at it. It's kind of like roguelike procedural generation stuff.
Right. You run around it's very roguelike, but it kind of has a stronger metagame along the lines of Rogue Legacy, where
Okay, cool.
you're leveling up using whatever coins and stuff you collected on your latest run.
Because by contrast, or maybe you'll correct me, but Moonhunters feels much more narrative led.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Moonhunters is not a roguelike,
Okay,
I would
yeah.
say.
So did you start Moonhunters like right afterwards, or was there a
We
period
actually
where
started
you were...
Moonhunters like halfway through Shattered Planet. We heard about the Square Enix collective starting to exist, and we pitched them this idea I came up with in 2 days from looking through our artist portfolio. And they loved it. So then we had to, on the side, while we were finishing Shattered Planet, we had to kind of make sure we had a solid concept for Moonhunters to put on the Square Enix collective.
That must have been difficult.
It was intense. It was fine. I multitask pretty well.
So the Square Enix collective was kind of like a pre-Kickstarter vote on projects that we want to then put on Kickstarter.
Yeah, it's kind of like a vetting process, and you used to get some amount of press or attention from being in the Square Enix collective. Now that they have, I think, like 100 games, it's not as I don't know, attention worthy,
Sure.
but it's still a good way to get like preview comments. If you're not fond at all, you don't know if anyone else thinks it's cool at all. You can absolutely put your game on Square Enix Collective and see what the Square Enix fans have to say.
It's a good way of, testing the idea before you put too much into it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that kind of concept of airing your idea and seeing, do people think it's interesting?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes into what you were talking about at GDC. Your make sure to share your ideas. I mean, Square Enix Collective is kind of a good way to share your idea and get feedback really quickly.
So do Square Enix then select like what's the process?
Yeah, they do have a little bit of a selection. I think they have once a month they have an opening for applications, and then they pick some to go up every month, and then based on the upvotes and downvotes of do you think this is a cool game, they may or may not, like, it's kind of a mutual decision of whether you move forward with them as a Kickstarter partner, which we did. We gave them 5% of our Kickstarter in exchange for them kind of helping boost our Kickstarter to their community. And then if that succeeds, then it's kind of, again, a mutual agreement if you want to move to official publishing.
But you
which
don't
we
have
did
to?
not. No, you don't.
That's cool. Often
Yeah,
you'd
they're
see
just-
stuff like that and they'd be like, no, you must, and this is the awful deal.
Yeah, no, the guy who runs it, Phil Elliott, he's really awesome, and he really has the heart of an indie, and he really wants to see more indie games succeed. So, I mean, that first step is completely their costs. You have nothing to risk, nothing to lose. The second one, I would say still, like, assuming you budgeted your Kickstarter correctly, I mean, if you can spend 5%, like a PR firm doing a couple of extra things for you, then again, there's no risk or loss. It's just like this service you're paying for. And then it's up to you if you think that they would be a good partner for publishing your game.
Yeah, which is kind of cool. You're not tied to them, so it's just extra options. Obviously, they'll have gone through a few steps with you, so they'll kind of know how you work and believe in your project a bit, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's a really cool little program.
And what's the link to Square Enix? It's just something they run, or is it? I remember when it first came about, they were kind of talking about you can, pitch us an idea using one of our properties.
Yeah, I think I'm not really sure. That's never happened, eh? They've only ever done other people's IP up to this point, I think.
So that's definitely not a requirement. It's just kind of a place where they're kind of working with early stage indie projects.
Yeah, I wonder if, because I know Phil Elliott, like, he basically dreamed up this program, and he pitched it to the executives, and I wonder if the other IP thing was like their idea of how to capitalize on this or something.
Yeah, I guess it might have been a good way for them to get it approved at kind of like a company level.
Yeah, maybe.
It's interesting that they haven't done. Yeah, I certainly haven't heard of one that's kind of come out that uses one of their properties.
Yeah, I haven't heard of any, but I haven't been paying attention very closely either.
So
I know if you want to talk to somebody who's gone the full way with them, another company here in Montreal, the Cardboard Utopia, making Children of Zodiacs. I believe I think this is public. They're going to be published by Square Enix. Cool. And they went through the collective. You can talk to them sometime.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'll
They're nice people.
Up. Yeah. I want to talk to you about community. I'm just writing it down to come back to later. That game dev community. But just more on Moonhunters. You did a Kickstarter then. Around when was that? That was
August 2014.
So this was right after or right in the middle of before Shattered Planet had released, or just
it was right. It was like a month after a month or two after Shattered Planet had come out on Steam. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. You like to keep yourselves busy.
Oh yeah.
And it was very successful. So it raised about 180,000 Canadian dollars, I think.
Right.
And
exactly.
That's a really big hit. That doesn't pay for development of a game like Moonhunters, I imagine.
No, not completely. But we also, I mean, based on that, it was much easier to get, like, we got an investor for part of it, and we got Canadian Media Fund for part of it. And it was all around much easier, having proved that, yes, there are definitely people on the internet who are excited about this game idea.
Okay, that's a cool point, that you can kind of use that excitement and that like, what can be a better confirmation than people having sent you money?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. And then Moonhunters itself came out last year?
Yep, it came out for Steam almost exactly a year ago, and then it came out for PlayStation 4 in July last year.
So I saw your talk at last year's GDC about procedural generation in Moonhunters. It was very interesting. Mm-hmm. But I remember you said one thing, which was by the time you finished Moonhunters, you're not sure you should have used procedural generation.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a marketing side, it was a very good move, because it really helps with streamers and YouTubers when it's different every time. You don't feel like you're spoiling anything when you watch one of them play it.
What
side?
But it was a lot more.
I mean, it definitely is. Sorry,
but it was a lot more work to make it.
Well, it was. I don't know if it's more work. I think it's like the same amount of work, but then you're not 100% assured of its quality all the time.
Okay, yeah. So you're making systems. You got to make sure they work, but you can't personally test every possible, combination of things that are possible. And you
Yeah,
suddenly,
and like when you're
yeah.
watching a playtest and somebody gets, a boring level, you're just like, that's my fault.
But it's really easy to make a boring level as well.
Yeah, it is.
So,
Exactly.
um, yeah, there's certainly a huge attraction into procedural systems as a game developer because
Hmm.
you're kind of making toys rather than making the finished thing.
Yeah, and I mean it keeps the game fresher for much longer. I mean if you're I remember making static content, and it's pretty miserable actually. The testing it the 100th time, it
That's
takes so
true.
much self-discipline to even see it anymore.
So,
Never mind enjoy it.
so it's possible to still enjoy your game a little bit as
Yeah,
long as there's
it's
some
magical, right?
variation to it. So maybe your game is better just because of that, because you spend more time as a game designer actually playing and experiencing the content.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the major benefits is the morale boost of using it, and of course, like I said, the marketing side of it, which is it helps prevent streamers and YouTubers from dampening sales rather than increasing sales.
I've got a question here from Andrew Breakout. Um, they're saying your talk is very practical and resonated well at GDC. I'm assuming this is the soapbox
Thank you.
talk about don't die. Just asking Andrew here. And could she expand on the burnout she experienced or avoided?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, friends of mine point out that I do work slightly too much, but I work too much on lots of different things and only when I'm excited to do it. So, the burnout that I tend to experience is when I've said yes to just too many things. I've said yes to, a
Interviews.
million different projects, or like I also volunteer as the co-director, co-founder of Pixels, which is a women in games initiative here in Montreal. And if I'm not careful, if I don't actually pay attention and say no, I'm not doing that for a week, I'm just playing Zelda for a week or whatever, then of course I will start to burn out and start becoming irritable, becoming bitter. But I was actually really lucky in that, as I said, my first job in the industry was in Norway.
Oh yeah.
And Norway generally has a less messed up work culture than North America in the first place. People just, they tend to work more 9 to 5 as a course of habit.
Probably
And
have generous
and look,
holidays, stuff like that. Uh, Good
take lots of
paid
holidays.
vacation. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, although I'm told there was a lot of crunch before Age of Conan shipped, I think at least some of it was completely voluntary. Like, I don't think they could have gotten away with saying you must do more than 50 hours a week. As it was, they did have an article in the local Oslo newspaper that if you did Google Translate, it said something like fun girls and boys.
Sorry, say that again. Fun. It said in the article, Funcom.
Funcom abuses young girls and boys. And that was because in order to get more overtime out of people, they actually shipped people from North Carolina, from their QA branch there, so that they could work them 80 hours a week. Because if they tried to do that to a Norwegian citizen, they would be sued for sure.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, all this to say that my very first job, I feel like it kind of instilled in me this idea that really good work can happen. You can make good games without suffering greatly. And in fact, the suffering might make the game worse.
Because I really want to talk about this. So I really strongly believe what you've just said, which is that crunch doesn't work. So
Yeah.
this is enforced crunch. It seems to happen at very big companies on occasion, sometimes for really long periods. And I think when you go beyond the like one weekend of we just need to do this, and you start doing it for weeks on end, and like we hear stories of like months or years of 7 days a week of work and 12-hour days, like to me, it just seems so obvious that no one's making good work there. No one is making
Yeah,
good work
it's
for
impossible. How
six
can you
months.
possibly creatively problem solve when you're completely exhausted? It's not possible.
And there's been studies done on it. So
Yeah.
I think the U.S. Navy, who have a really good reason to get the most out of, their people under pressure, worked out that really long term, it was something like 60 hours a week is kind of the most you can do.
Yeah.
So I mean, trying to go beyond that is just like awful and really counterproductive. Um,
Yep.
so it just amazes me every time. Like it hasn't gone away. Crunch is still, or long crunch is definitely still happening in game development. And I think, I don't know, it feels short-sighted. It feels like you're focusing on hours rather than what's actually being created as a
Well, I
company.
think there's this feedback loop that happens that when you are in a certain state of mind where you feel like all that matters is finishing this thing, then you start having this feedback loop where you feel better when you're working more, regardless of the outcome. Because when you start thinking about it more like, am I doing everything I can do, instead of actually looking at what the results are, it's very easy to reward yourself just for having worked hard. Like that itself is the result that you're looking for. And so, how to put this?
It's like your brain is tricking itself,
Yeah,
that
your
the
brain
long
is telling
hours
you,
become
good
the
job,
reward.
you did what we set out to do. And so, I mean, okay, so something that I mentioned in my talk very briefly is that a lot of people, when they get into this situation, they stop setting work hours. They stop saying, okay, I am going to plan as if I am working from this hour to this hour, and they just start working, quote unquote, all the time. Maybe they take an hour here or there to do something, but other than that, they're just always working. And it's hard when you're in that mindset to believe that you could get more done if you just worked less.
It's true,
Because
yeah.
it's counterintuitive,
Yeah.
like, but it's true, because as soon as you start planning out, okay, I need to get this done in the next 2 hours before I get home, you actually buckle down, you actually focus, and you just get more done in those 2 hours than you would have if you had 4 hours
Yeah.
or infinite hours.
Since I've worked for myself, I don't know if this will resonate with you. I've found that if I can do in a given day about 4 hours of actual focus work, that's a really successful day.
Yeah.
And demanding more than that is counterproductive. I mean, I can use my time to do other things, but when you're actually creating, any day
Yeah.
I've done that, I'm very happy.
I've heard that from multiple people, and I'm starting to think that people who think they're doing more than 4 hours of focused creative work are just deluding themselves. Like maybe one in a million people can do 5 hours a day or something. But I mean, really, if you think you're being super focused and you think you're being super sharp, and also you're doing that for more than 4 or 5 hours a day, like you're probably wrong.
And it's very easy to waste time and
Yeah.
procrastinate. I'm really good at that. Avoiding work at all costs sometimes.
Yeah.
Um,
Now it's hard. Like if your job is like mine, or probably yours as well, there is again kind of an infinite amount of busy work you could be doing. Whether it's paperwork for this one thing that you should have done a few months ago, or it's emails from that one, YouTuber or whatever. Like you could just spend a lot of your time kind of faffing about. Like technically it's work, but it's not, focused labor. And then maybe that helps you get into this mindset of, oh yeah, I can definitely work for 12 hours a day. I don't know.
reading Twitter, is that useful?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Very important. Got to keep up on the
Gotta keep
latest
up. Yeah.
Shark Prince news.
So Andrew's kind of got a follow-up question. So how does your team deal with scope control in game projects? It's kind of related to what you're saying, a limited amount of time. How do you
Yeah.
decide what to cut? And maybe do you have an example of a decision that was very tough?
Oh, geez. So this is what happens. I don't know if this is how every company does. Have an idea of what our game is, and we have an idea of what we would do right now to move the game forward. Like we have a very strong idea of what the next, 2 weeks to a month will look like. But we're not really sure about the rest of the game. Like we feel in our guts like, okay, this is about a year game, or this is about a 2-year game, or whatever. Invariably, we're wrong. That's not the point. The point is we make ourselves a hard deadline for the next thing that we know we can achieve. So if we can see like, okay, in the next 6 weeks, we think we can achieve concrete goal XYZ. Like, for example, we're going to add a leveling up system, and we're going to add pets or something like that.
Yeah.
In 6 weeks from now. Then we put that down, and we somehow try to make ourselves outwardly accountable. So sometimes like we'll organize a play test, or we'll organize going to PAX or something like that, like specifically something that ideally we can't delay.
Yeah.
And then we start working on it, and invariably a few weeks in, we realize we're not going to hit the deadline. There's too much to do. It's impossible. It's not going to get done in that time. And that is the point at which most people choose to start crunching themselves. And 3 weeks isn't that bad. It's a little bit much. And maybe if you're fine with taking a few weeks off after PAX, then you could do that. But then why not just give yourselves a full 8 weeks instead of the 6 weeks in the first place, right? Now, for us, what we do is we then ask, what is the minimum we can possibly do to reach our goals by this time? And if we look at it and we say, again, it's not even possible to reach our minimum, well, then we completely messed up, and that's a bad news. We probably have to cut a feature or something, but usually we can make a minimum.
Yep.
Because as soon as we put the minimum in there and we play test it and we try it out, we realize that we didn't want to do that other thing to the maximum we wanted to do anyway. So now we should probably just take it in the direction that we can see from playtesting is the better way to go with it. And that kind of repeats itself throughout the whole production cycle. It's really hard. The only thing that makes it harder is that for a system-driven game, it's unclear how to move forward sometimes until you hit alpha.
So when you have enough systems in there that they start interacting and the game starts to feel fun.
Yeah, so it is very, very difficult to play test and have hard deadlines and stuff for the first, 6 months sometimes, a year maybe.
So short iterations with a deadline you can't move, like a place you're showcasing a demo or something. I think that's really good advice. That's worked for me as well. What about kind of before that, the bigger picture? So when you decide the game you want to make, some parts are fuzzy, but what parts are definite for you?
For me, it's kind of the moment to moment. So the core gameplay is kind of always the goal. Although for a system-driven game, again, it can be really hard to separate that from the 18 different systems that create the core gameplay. But I think that's why game jamming is actually a useful exercise. To get used to identifying the moment to moment of the player experience and breaking it down into manageable chunks of development.
That's good for your scoping as well, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, the sooner you have something concrete that you can play around with, the sooner you can rescope and reprioritize. Because, reprioritizing constantly is stressful if you're not ready for it. But it's absolutely necessary. You have to be asking yourself every few weeks, am I really doing what's most important? Let's go. Makes sense when I look at the build as it is now, because, games are just so complex that things change.
Has that process kind of stayed the same across the multiple games you've launched now as a small team? Have you changed anything significantly about how you work?
Well, we've grown a bit. We're now 7 people. And I do find that we are starting to have little mini strike teams almost, where it's really just like one artist and one programmer. Like they're in charge of that feature. And back in the day, it would have been like the whole team gets together and we talk about this one feature while they're like analyzing it and getting feedback on it and developing it and whatever. But it's a little bit silly to have all 7 people involved in every single thing like that. So now
that must be nice as as kind of
Sorry?
direct. That must be really nice as kind of director, where you can be like, you two go off and come up with a solution, and we'll play test it with you. You know, we'll give you feedback, but we don't have to do all the work.
Yeah, well, I'm in the fortunate position where all of my programmers and artists are also kind of junior or mid-level designers in their own rights. So, and everybody's interested in game design, which I think that's universal. Everybody loves game design. So, I get to act kind of more as a lead designer where I set the goals of a feature and then I kind of let the team decide the best way to reach that goal based on what features they have ownership over.
And you're all in one office?
Yeah.
How do you kind of structure your week or month? Do you meet every day, or?
Yeah, we actually have a stand up at 10:10 every morning, so I'm gonna miss it this morning. But usually everybody comes into work. We have one guy who comes in 9 to 5, and we all tend to work. We generally work 10 to 6, but yeah, we have a stand up meeting. And then we have sprint planning every couple weeks. I have one-on-ones every couple weeks.
You're going with a kind of traditional agile-like software development
Yeah,
system.
generally.
So that stand-up meeting is, I've been through this, but I don't yet do it for games, but like everyone just says what they're working on, what they did yesterday. It only takes a minute.
And if anything's blocking them.
Yes, yeah.
And actually, I've noticed teams tend to resist the stand-up meetings for the first couple months, because they feel like it's a waste of their time. But after the first couple of months, if they go a couple of days without it, they'll realize why they want to do it, because it is really satisfying being able to say what you did yesterday, or it is sometimes embarrassing to say, I didn't get done what I wanted to do yesterday, so I have to do it today. And just that little tiny bit of monkey brain, like social accountability is really effective, I think.
That's cool. That could work. Yeah, definitely. Very interesting. I want to talk about your city, Montreal.
Sure.
It has a really big community, I think, without having been there, but just from following people. There's a lot of people making games.
Oh my God, it's enormous. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have like AAA all the way down to indie. What's the are there meetups?
Yeah. So when I first came here 6 years ago, we had just had our first indie group start meeting called the Montreal Game Society, MRGS or MERGS. And so I attended, and it was really fun. It was really sweet. We kind of had AAAs were welcome to come. We had academics come. It was just kind of the intersection of worlds. And it grew and grew and grew until it was like hundreds of people every meetup. And it's kind of fractured in the last year or year and a half. So now there's lots of different little groups that are meeting based on their special interests. And I'm hoping that somebody can unify them again, because I really miss that that intersection of people just celebrating creation. So MERGS, the number one thing it always had at its center was that it wasn't supposed to be a commercial space. It was not supposed to be a place where you advertise your game. It was supposed to be, you could do a live demo. Any scale of game was welcome. In fact, I think they had a little bit of a bias towards student games or first games or game jam prototypes. But anyone was welcome to come and show whatever they were working on. And I found it so inspiring, because I had been working in AAA at that point for 3 years, and I had been at school just doing, FPS levels and whatever. And the idea of going in and just being able to make whatever the heck I wanted and cheer on other people, it felt like being in those 1800s poet salons, in Ireland or whatever. People go in and famous poets would go have coffee together or something. It felt like that, but for video games. And it was amazing. And I miss those days.
Though we have stuff like that here in Dublin, and I feel the same way. It is really inspiring when you go along and see what other people are making. It makes you want to do more. and cheer them on as well.
Yeah.
But how could it possibly grow to hundreds of people? It seems like inevitable that if you get your community kind of grows beyond that, it's not going to work the same way.
Yeah. Well, the Mergs, I mean, it grew to a size where only a couple of venues could really handle them on a weekday night. Because we also wanted a projector, and we also wanted good audio, and all these kinds of things that are kind of limiting. And so the venue that they settled on was really far outside downtown. And it's also a co-op, and it didn't have great food, and I don't know, there was just all these kinds of like things. And so now it's kind of shrunk again a bit. I haven't been in a while. I should go again, but I don't know. I hope they can bring it back downtown somehow. That's what I'm hoping.
Maybe someone will make a new, smaller thing, and that can be the place for. Yeah, it's very hard because you can kind of foster things like this, but you can't control them, I feel.
Oh, absolutely not. It's just kind of the will of the people that occurs. But I mean, there's estimated to be, I think, 10,000 game developers in Montreal.
The city's about 1 million-ish?
That's a good question. I'm going to Google that real quick. But I mean, Ubisoft alone has like 3,000 or 5,000 of them. So
that's funny.
No, it's not a joke. I think their campus here literally has 3,000 or 5,000 game developers just in like 3 buildings. Montreal is 1.5 million.
1.5 million. So that's a lot of people. Dublin's about 1 million people. We definitely don't have 10,000 game developers.
Yeah, I hear that in certain neighborhoods, otherwise, the Ubi neighborhoods, everybody has opinions about what it means to date a game developer.
Wow. Probably they could do a good interview series of like boyfriends and girlfriends of AAA game developers in Montreal about crunch.
I hear they have to crunch a lot, so that's too bad.
Oh well. Okay, I've got a question here from Kevin. Procedural stuff question. Do you think a procedural series of quests, like 4 to 5 short missions, can be compelling with a little procedural flavor text versus having a limited number of better crafted quests?
I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by a procedural series. I think the answer is always yes. There's always something you can make that is compelling. The question is how much time and effort it will take you to make that internal logic satisfying for the player to explore. Because that's the reason you're making it procedural, is that now it's its own gameplay system. It's making it replayable. I think part of the reason why I've never been compelled by procedural quests in any game so far is that part of the reason you do quests is to feel like you've made progress.
Yes.
Like it's this extrinsic reward mechanism to make you do something that you weren't intrinsically going to do before. And when you're in that mode, you kind of want the little check mark of, okay, I did it, it's done. I don't have to do it anymore. And so if you're going to take that away from me, if you're going to say, no, you don't get the feeling of progression anymore, you have to replace that with something. And you can replace it with something like the first thing that comes to mind is, the idea that the player is supposed to figure out the logic of how the quests are spawned or something like that. Like if that's really fun, then sure.
Or in MMOs,
but otherwise,
it's like long-term rewards, like faction rewards. They do that in MMOs. Yeah, it slowly build up by doing these quests. It can be jarring in single player though, I think. So
absolutely.
Like Fallout 4 had a whole had a lot of handcrafted content, and then it had smaller, like repeatable, procedurally generated quests, and I felt like I'd been tricked when I realized that. Yeah,
exactly.
Like it was out of place, maybe.
Oh, I get a chance here to plug the textbook that I'm editing. So I'm actually working with Tarn Adams of Dwarf Fortress on editing a procedural generation in game design textbook. Sweet. And it comes up here because there's specifically multiple chapters about why and when and the risks of procedural generation. And nobody goes specifically into quests, but we do have a full section of the book, I think like 5 or 6 chapters on narrative design, procedural narrative. And everyone agrees it's really hard.
Is the book out yet?
No, it's coming in June. It's from CRC Press.
Cool.
And I'll be plugging it on Twitter all the time for sure around when it comes out. But the main thing that's impressive to me is the number and variety of cool authors we got to make articles. There's just so many great people giving their inner thoughts about procedural generation. I'm really excited.
So I'm gonna just, there's your Twitter in chat. You should definitely follow. Sounds like a great book. And is the book itself procedurally generated?
In that I am a procedural product of the universe in the first place, yes.
Aren't we all?
Well, it depends. I guess if you think I'm an authored piece of content, then maybe you have a different worldview. But
I'm going through this now. I have 2 babies, and we keep kind of, looking at it going, oh, are you doing that because that's your genetics, or is it because we've been showing you and you've just made that leap then because...
Are they authored? Are they procedural? We don't know.
One comment about crunch, become a parent and it forces you, become a parent who spends time with their children, and it forces you to not work long hours. So that's one bit of
I
advice.
might experience that someday. Maybe mentally. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if part of the reason why I'm so gung-ho against crunch right now is because I anticipate at some point, if I had a kid, I would really appreciate it if the world
was better.
Let me do that without shaming me, because it just makes sense.
In Norway, I think it might be in Norway, parental leave for fathers. It's certainly in a few of the Scandinavian countries, and I think Norway might be one of them. So there's maternity leave that's paid, but there's also some that's paid for dads, and that's really interesting because I think it helps working mothers basically not be the only people who are like have to mind babies when they're young.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think paternity leave is absolutely crucial to normalizing prioritizing your home life and really treating having a kid, whether it's natural or adopted, as a big event in your life. I think it's ridiculous that paternity leave isn't a normal thing to take in a lot of cultures.
Yeah, and it's definitely not the norm yet. There's only a few countries that are really pushing it. I hope that changes.
Yeah, me too.
Cool.
KidFox has maternity and paternity leave that are equal.
Well done.
Yeah.
You guys
nobody's taken it yet, so
we managed to fire them just before they did.
Yeah. No, we all happen to be young punks, so give us a few years.
That's cool. That's really leading with things you believe in.
Yeah.
Well done. I have to work out our exact. I got to do what you're doing basically. Good idea. Yeah. I think we're gonna wrap up there, but
all right, cool.
Thank you so much for your time and all the advice, and maybe just have one last question.
Sure.
So if you were talking to a brand new game developer today, what do you think is the best bit of advice you could give?
My number one advice to new game developers is to try to get really good at something. And I don't know if that means that you want to make game jam games about that something, whether you want to be really good at writing, or you want to be really good at modeling or texturing or level designing or scripting, or whatever it is that you want to be really good at that you enjoy. I don't know if that means you want to make little games. I don't know if that means you want to go work at a big studio. Don't let anybody shame you about how you do it. But it is important that you become good at something and feel confident about that, because that's going to be the base at which you learn the rest of game development and form your opinions about game development and your own skills. I see a lot of people tempted to go into indie because, in a way you do kind of make your own opportunities and you kind of can ramble along there with you and your friends. But just whatever you do, don't get distracted from improving your skills, because that's what you're going to remember in years later of what you learned from doing this project. The project itself being cool is great, but you building your skills should be the number one priority.
So level up your character.
Yes.
Nice.
Pick a class.
Pick a class. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for joining me. Thanks everyone for tuning in, for your questions, and we will put this up on YouTube in future. And remember to follow Tanya on
thank
Twitter.
You everyone, and thank you Colm. Good luck Ireland and the world.
See you soon, guys.